In actuality, I discovered 40 years ago that all of our anger is coming from our brain. It's not coming from the behavior or things outside of us. But no, you can step in and you can argue with your brain and decide what's true and what's not true. In that moment, the anger will disappear immediately, like you waved a magic wand. I coined this model called the 007 effect in marriages. What happens for a lot of people is they treat that marriage license like it's a license to kill. It's like a license to kill their marriage.
Welcome to Marriage IQ, the podcast helping you become an intelligent spouse.
I'm Heidi Hastings.
And I'm Scott Hastings. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're excited that you can see us or hear us. And join us today for another exciting episode of Marriage IQ. You know, Heidi, I struggle sometimes with anger.
Yeah, a lot of frustration, especially working in the medical field.
Yeah.
With unexpected calls late at night or providers calling out.
And sometimes it just hits me out of the blue, right? I try to do my best not to be a jerk. And yet it still happens. I think it happens less than it used to, maybe.
Yeah, I think you've gotten
Would
a better...
you agree with me?
Yeah, but we do have a guy with us today that says he has the life-changing cure for anger.
Ooh. Interesting.
And like you, he is a physician. Dr. Mort Orman is an internal medicine physician and a 40-year anger elimination and stress elimination expert. He has written and contributed to 39 books on how to eliminate anger and stress without using drugs or relaxation exercises like we talk about here on Marriage IQ sometimes, and even more than other traditional anger management techniques. He's the creator of the ultimate anger elimination system. Dr. Mort has led more than 100 anger and stress elimination courses for doctors, nurses, lawyers, entrepreneurs, and other professionals, and even the FBI. He's also been the official sponsor, I think this is super interesting, of National Stress Awareness Month in the United States every April since 1992. His newest book, Dr. Orman's Life-Changing Anger Cure, was just released in April of 2024. So welcome to our show, Dr. Mort.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this topic, and particularly around marriage and preventing divorce is really one of my passions. I really would like to, in my retirement years as a physician, try and heal as many marriages, save as many marriages, and prevent as many divorces as I can.
Well, we are on the same mission right there.
You're in the right place.
We're so grateful that you've joined us today.
So, Dr. Moore, you know, it's interesting. You've been doing this for a long time, right? Is there a reason? Is this a personal thing that you kind of grew into, or did you start out thinking, I'm going to be an anger expert?
Oh, I didn't. I was more an anger victim, to tell you the truth. I didn't grow up in an angry family. My parents weren't angry. But when I started to be a teenager and later on in college, medical school, medical training, I started getting angry at myself a lot. I started having very high expectations of myself, and I would get angry and frustrated if I didn't meet up to them. And that would spread out into other areas. By the time I opened my practice, I would get angry at my patients if they didn't follow my advice or did stupid things, which people tend to do, or just people in general behave badly. I was really triggered very easily. For example, I took up tennis in my late 20s. And I don't know if you ever saw John McEnroe play tennis. I was not as good tennis-wise as he was, but I could yell and scream and throw my racket around and disturb the people playing on either side of me with the best of them. And I just couldn't control it. It really bothered me because I didn't like it. I didn't like not being in control of my emotions. And it was causing a lot of havoc in my personal life. I had one failed relationship after another that I couldn't figure out how to stop that pattern. So even though I was successful as a physician and saving lives, I couldn't save my own relationships, and I didn't feel like a success. I felt like in those domains of emotions and relationships, I was failing. And I wasn't used to failing. I didn't like it. And then the other thing is, as Scott obviously knows, as physicians, when we take care of a large group of people over time, we easily recognize the angry people from the not so angry people. And you can see what happens over time. So you see that those people end up with a lot more problems. They have more heart attacks and strokes and addictions, and they'll come in and tell you that their spouse asked for a divorce or their kids won't talk to them anymore, or they just got arrested because they lost control or had a road rage episode or something like that. So you see this nightmare of what anger produces in people's lives, and you're sitting there as a physician, young doctor I was at the time, much younger than most of my patients that I inherited. And I said, I don't want to end up like that. I don't want to have all those bad things happen as a result of not being able to control my anger. So that kind of put me on a path where I was seeking answers. And I tried the traditional stuff. It helped a little bit, but not that much. Because I would wake up every day and I was the same angry guy, which is interesting because I was born on Groundhog's Day. My birthday is February 2nd. And it's literally how it felt every day. I was just the same angry guy.
Yep, same thing.
Doesn't matter what you try, what technique you use, what breathing, what meditation, punching bags, running 5 miles, doesn't matter. You still get triggered.
So where's your breakthrough then?
Well, the breakthrough is I started doing personal development work after a while, and I started piecing things together from different programs. And eventually I had this breakthrough where I was able to identify the internal causes of my anger, which I'd never really addressed before. I had always blamed the outside sources, the triggers, the behavior of other people. And I had never quite inquired about what was going on inside me that was generating the anger. But in actuality, I discovered 40 years ago that all of our anger is coming from our brain. It's not coming from the behavior of things outside of us. It's how our brain tells us to look at those events and look at those circumstances and those behaviors. And it tells us to look at it in a certain way that when you do look at it in those ways and you believe what your brain is telling you, then the emotion of anger naturally follows. And I didn't understand that mechanism. I didn't understand my brain had a simple formula for creating all of its emotions. So there's a formula for anger, there's a formula for anxiety, there's a formula for guilt, there's a formula for worry. Take any emotion, and the brain has a certain set of filters, ways of having you look at things that will produce that emotion if you look at that way. And I didn't understand any of this at the time, but that's where the real controls are. When you understand how you're internally creating the anger, then you can step in and do something about it. And all those causes are invisible. The external causes are very obvious. You can see them, everybody else can see them. But the internal things our brain is doing, they're invisible. So unless you figure them out and know what they are, you're kind of at their mercy. And that's where I was in my 20s and up to my mid 30s or so. And then
Would you say you were more angry than, like, say, most people? Or would you
it's
say?
hard to say. I was pretty angry. I had a lot of anger. Like I said, I got triggered very, very easily. And, when you get angry at your patients, there's a problem, that angry. And all my relationships suffered as a result of it. So it was clear that it was a big problem for me. But like I say, until I understood the invisible internal mechanisms, I couldn't do anything about it.
How many years did it take you to get to that point of the aha moment?
It took me about 2 or 3 years of personal development work before things came together. But once it did, it was like there was no going back. I mean, once I saw the mechanism, it hasn't changed. It's been 40 years. It's been exactly the same mechanism all the time, whether I'm working with my own anger or whether I'm working with somebody else and their anger. It's always the same stories your brain is giving you that makes you angry.
I like that perspective because you're busting two myths right there with what you said. The first is that my anger is because of someone else's actions.
Mm-hmm.
And the second is this is just the way I am and I can't change that.
And that's what I thought. If you'd have come up to me back then when I was struggling with my anger and trying everything under the sun to get rid of it and failing, if you said, do you ever see a day when you're not going to be an angry guy? I would say, I just think that's part of my personality. I just think that's who I am. I think I'm always going to be that way. Incredibly shocked to discover that, hey, I can make this anger go away whenever I want. I didn't know I had that ability. And then once you understand the mechanism, you realize I can do things people think are impossible. Even today, most people think you can't make anger just go away. You have to release it or put up with it or do whatever you do. But no, you can step in and you can argue with your brain and decide what's true and what's not true. And then when you find out your brain's lying to you or misleading you, then the anger just disappears without you having to do anything else other than see the situation more accurately and more truthfully.
So I want to drill down on that. But first, just to back up, your anger can't really be blamed on your upbringing, right? Your parents.
No, it was self-generated in my case.
All right. So I think that's an important point, too, for people to understand and realize that it may not always be from a traumatic childhood, although there might be some trauma in there somewhere, but nothing like a big trauma is what it sounds like, right?
No, not for me. No. It was a bunch of little self-inflicted anger itself, and then that metastasized.
And then Secondly, I want to drill down on the point of the anger itself. My understanding is that the emotion of anger, we can't necessarily help. But are you saying you can eliminate it from actually starting, or are you saying that you can eliminate it very quickly after it starts?
That's a good question because there's a lot of layers to that. And it's a yes and kind of a thing. It's not an either or answer. So I first made this discovery 40 years ago. Then I started working on myself, and I had a lot to work on because every time I got angry, I use it as an example to work on. So I started digging in and saying, is what my brain telling me true or not? And then for any triggered episode of anger in the when you have the opportunity to look at it, which is hard to do right if you're in the middle of it, but when you're removed and you can a little bit later can look at it, I could go back and I could say, oh, I can see where I misunderstood something or my brain tricked me. And in that moment, the anger will disappear immediately in the short term. Okay. So you can make triggered anger disappear like you waved a magic wand when you understand where your brain tricked you. Now, that doesn't stop you from continuing being triggered over and over again in the beginning. But what happened for me is when I started doing that, and I did it hundreds and hundreds of times, and you do that over a period of months and months and months, and maybe a year and a half, then you're actually rewiring your brain every time you do that. Your brain's telling you, look at things this way, and you're realizing, wait a minute, that's wrong. This is the truth. So you're building another pathway in your brain now that's weaker in the beginning than these ones that you've been using for many years, that's been conditioned. But over time, as you do that work, you become less reactive. So now it takes a lot for me to get triggered to get angry. In my 20s and 30s, it was at a drop of a dime. You can eliminate anger in the short term, just like using an anger management technique, a deep breathing technique or a tapping technique or some other technique. You can dissipate the anger immediately. But the neat thing about this approach is that over time, it makes you a less reactive, less angry person. It really changes who you are as a human being. And the change comes from how you see the world, how you understand the world. And that's what changes you as a human being. And you become a less angry person.
So it sounds like to me then you're reducing those triggers, but I don't know if it's possible to completely eliminate all.
You're not eliminating triggers at all. The triggers are going to be the triggers. People are going to say what they say. The government's going to do what it does. Politicians are going to do what they do. The media is going to say what it says. The TV is going to do what it does. You're not eliminating the triggers. What you're doing is taking control of what's inside, where the real power is. As a human being, our ability to control our emotions comes from inside. It's not external. And that's where you wield that power. You can't wield that power if you don't understand how your brain is driving the emotions. But once you do, then now you've got an opportunity to take control whenever you want to.
So, how do you see this showing up in marriage most often with those that you work with? You said that's kind of a passion project of yours.
Well, I think marriage is a crucible for getting angry. It's so easy to trigger. You're two different human beings. You have two different upbringings, two different brain conditioning, two different sets of likes and dislikes and what you want. And then there's the control issues. All that stuff can trigger your brain telling you that person's not behaving in a proper way or they're doing something they shouldn't be doing or all the stuff your brain tells you that can make you angry. So it's not a surprise that there's anger in relationship. It's actually predictable and guaranteed to a certain degree. But that doesn't mean you have to have anger in a relationship. And that's one of the myths we have today is a lot of people think that if they're not fighting and arguing, they don't have a good relationship. But I don't think that's true. Fortunately, I got rid of most of my anger before I met my wife. We've been married 41 years now. And trust me, that would not have happened.
Congratulations.
It would not have happened if I had not made these discoveries back 40 years ago and continued to live from them. But she didn't have a lot of anger in her personality, and I had gotten rid of most of mine. So in the course of our 41 years, we rarely fight. We rarely argue. Occasionally, we will have a conflict about something, but we don't believe that fighting is what you should do in a marriage. We believe the opposite, that you should be supporting each other, building each other up, being positive towards each other. I coined this model called the 007 effect in marriages.
Okay, tell us about that.
Okay, so when you get married, you go down, you have to get a marriage license, right? So everybody gets a marriage license. And then what happens for a lot of people is they treat that marriage license like it's a license to kill. It's like a license to kill their marriage. We're married now, so I can criticize you, I can berate you, I can tear you down, I can get angry at you, and you're stuck with me. You have to stay with me, and I get to do all that, and you get to do those things to me. And it's like our marriage license gives us this license to kill our relationship. That's what a lot of people do. They behave badly towards each other and negatively towards each other and criticize and blame and make the other person wrong. And after a while, one party says, I'm done. I don't want to do that anymore. And it literally kills the marriage. And for some reason, we've been sort of brainwashed into thinking that this is okay behavior. It's the way you should behave in a marriage because that's what married people do. But to me, it's all crazy.
Well, so there are a few things here, Dr. Mort, I'm thinking of. And one is that some people would say, well, I want to go totally to the opposite side. I don't want to yell and scream. So they end up internalizing everything.
Mm-hmm.
They sweep everything under the rug, and you have
And
something
sometimes shut
that's
down.
just as bad in the end.
They come into our office.
Right. So I think that when we teach on this subject, when we educate people, it's really important to talk about perspective, because people might take away from this, maybe the answer is just to shut everything down, which we've spent so much time saying that's equally as bad. And, fighting too, like, how do you define that? Because some people would say, well, that might just be conflict. Every marriage is going to have conflict, even the very, very best marriages.
Conflict is just you've got two different agendas or two different desires or likes or wants or needs or whatever. So there's going to be that in any two people. It doesn't have to be a marriage. It could be a business partnership. It could be anything.
So it's learning how to do it well, to do conflict well, so that we don't feel shut down or we don't feel, as you're teaching, overreactive, right?
And another distinction that I find very helpful is I look at upstream and downstream. So what I call upstream is you get triggered and you get angry. Your brain something happens, that's the trigger. Your brain tells you, look at it these ways. This is how I want you to look at it. And you do, and then you get angry, okay? Now, from that point on, everything that happens is downstream. So do I express that anger? Do I suppress that anger? If I express it, how do I express it? Do I manage it? What do I do with it? It all comes from the fact that you've got it in the first place, okay? You are stirred up. Whether you feel it or not doesn't matter. Your body, if we could measure your physiology, it would be stirred up. So something got you stirred up inside, and now you have a problem, and what am I going to do with that? And there are good things to do with it and bad things to do with it. Things make things worse and things that make things better. So there's all these issues related to the downstream once you get angry. What I'm more interested in is, can you show a person how to turn that switch off so they don't have the anger anymore to have to worry about what they do with it? Suppress it, not suppress. Because either way is a problem. When you express your anger, that can be a problem. When you suppress your anger, that can be a problem. It's better not to be angry.
Or to neutralize the anger.
Yeah, and let me say, I'm only talking about destructive anger here. I'm not talking about anger that has positive value in your life.
Right, because I think one thing that might be hard is, as a human being, let's use the Dalai Lama, like, there's going to be things that can get him angry. And I think that's probably just something that we all probably have to realize at some point or another. There are things that are going to cause anger in us, and maybe it's neutralizing that anger.
Whenever you get angry, it's first thing to do is realize, okay, my brain made me angry. Now, how did it do it? Okay. And when you understand that, then you can decide whether the anger is reasonable anger, not reasonable anger. You can go in, and if the anger is flawed in any way or coming from a flawed source in any way in your brain, then you can step in and correct that or appreciate what's the truth versus what your brain is telling you to do. That's true emotional intelligence, when you understand that that's how emotions get generated. And there have been some neuroscientists who are supporting this view in terms of the latest research on how the brain works and creates emotions.
So, Dr. Mort, can I go back to when you were saying that we need to just tell our brain what it's doing wrong and evaluating that? Could you give us a real life example of things that you see when couples or individuals want to work with you? Give us a real life example. What does this look like?
So here's an example. Remember I said my wife and I, we don't fight. We don't get in arguments. But when we first got married, there was this one situation where we would really get a little bit edgy with each other. And it was weird because our baseline was like 0. So it really stood out when it happened. And I noticed it was a pattern. And it only happened when we would go on a car trip somewhere. Weird. you know? And it was even weirder because we would never argue or fight when we were driving to our destination. We would never fight when we were at our destination. It was only when we drove home.
On the way back. Huh.
Yeah. And usually I'd be driving and my wife would be in the passenger seat and we'd be driving home. And at some point my wife would say, oh, there's something over here. It's only like an hour off of our path. I've always wanted to see that. Let's go do that. And I would go like, no, we're not doing that. I didn't realize at the time, but I had like a tone and it was a very derogatory,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then she would react like, what's with your attitude? It's like, I said, we're not doing that. I said, why? She said, why not? I said, because we're driving home. And after it happened like 2 or 3 times, I said to myself, okay, I'm angry. I got to figure out why I'm angry. Okay, let me go through my thing. Okay, so let me go through my understanding of how my brain makes me angry. So I realized the first thing is, well, I'm thinking that she did something bad and wrong by making this request. And I said, is that true? As soon as I asked the question, I realized, well, technically, it's not wrong. It's just she's got a different preference than mine. In our family, we go on car trips. When we drove home, we drove directly home. We didn't stop, except for gas or food or something like that, or bathroom breaks. In her family, they took side trips all the time. That was their normal way. So it wasn't like she was doing anything wrong. We just had 2 different backgrounds and 2 different preferences. And as soon as I saw that, I realized that was my brain tricking me into thinking she was doing something terrible by making this request. And in truth, she wasn't. That thing died because the next time she said, let's go over here, I said, sure, honey, if you want to go over here, let's go. It's not, it's a fine, legitimate request. And if that would make you happy, we'll do that. Now, I no longer saw it as a sin or as a wrong thing to do. I had retrained my brain to stop doing that. And it ended that problem in our relationship. We've never had that problem again.
But what if it's a request that you really, really don't want to do after you've thought about it?
Then you say, I don't think you should do that. And that's happened. There was one particular incident where an old boyfriend of hers came back from out of nowhere into her life. And she was excited about not rekindling the relationship, but just getting back in touch with him. And he had said to her, I'm going to be nearby and I have a houseboat that I rented. Why don't you come and spend a couple of days with me on the houseboat? So she said to me one day that she was thinking of doing that. I said, I don't think you're going to do that.
Without you?
I don't think that's a good thing for our relationship. She wasn't thinking it was going to lead in anything, but I'm going like, hey, you don't want to jeopardize what we've built. And I put my foot down. I said, you're not doing that. And so it's not that you don't ever stand up for what you think is right and what is wrong or create a boundary. A lot of times people think you have to get angry to create the boundary. No, you just say, this is what I will do and what I won't do, or what I will stand for, what I won't stand for. And I wasn't angry that she was doing that, but I was very clear that it was not a good thing for our relationship. She was less clear at the time because she had reasons why she thought it would be okay and it wouldn't be harmful. But I had a different point of view and I asserted that my point of view without anger. And she agreed because she didn't want to put a rift in the relationship.
Okay.
You talked a little bit about emotional intelligence. I want to talk a little bit about just repairing after angry outbursts, forgiveness.
Yes. Again, these are all the downstream things. Different people will express anger and react to anger differently depending upon how you grew up and what you've learned to do. Some people grow up in an environment where it was taboo to be angry, so they had to suppress their anger. Other people grew up in families where it was all about expressing anger, and so they got very expressive about it. Some people punch things, some people just simmer with it themselves. But we do feel guilt, we do feel shame when we're sitting by ourselves, 3 o'clock in the morning, we can't sleep, when we look back over what we did and what we said and how it hurt the other person, and we don't like it. We wish we could stop it, but we don't know how because we don't have the missing pieces of what our brain is doing. So we're kind of stuck. And that's why a lot of people believe that you're just stuck with anger and you can't really get rid of it because they're missing the most important puzzle pieces. So it's still work involved, but it's doable. And you can make lasting, permanent changes in your activity, how often you get angry, whether you blow up at other people, whether you hurt other people with it. You can get rid of a lot of that stuff that I consider is very damaging, not helpful at all. Part of what I'm out here doing is just trying to make people understand, hey, you can do it. And it's not hard, by the way. You don't have to be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a rocket scientist. The only difficulty is that what your brain does is invisible to you and to other people.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when I feel personally like I'm not angry, I'm just being a little bit more healthy assertiveness, giving an opinion that might be different. And Scott interprets that as me being angry, and then it might trigger something in him.
Well, there you go, right there. You just said it.
How do you work that through?
His brain looked at your behavior and told him it was coming from anger in you. It wasn't coming from anger in you.
Yeah.
His brain got it wrong. Okay.
So do I tell him that?
Well, that's a different issue. The first thing is understand that he got angry because his brain made an assumption about where your behavior was coming from that was incorrect. Okay. And he's sitting there saying, you really have no reason to be angry with me. It's wrong of you to be angry with me in his brain. Okay. But he got the diagnosis wrong in the first place. Okay. But didn't realize it because that's what brains do. They trick us, and we're not so quick to catch it all the time. All right. But that's essentially demonstrating the point we're talking about here is that we get upset and angry a lot of times because our brain makes us think something's true that isn't true.
Okay, so the first question is what they said bad and wrong? Is that what you said the first question is that we ask ourselves?
Is what they did. Could be they said something, they did something, they forgot to do something, whatever. The first story our brain tells us is that whatever that other person or thing did was bad and wrong. For example, you're working at your computer one day. You've just done 2 hours of glorious, the best work you've ever done. You're so proud of it, and you're just so happy. And then all of a sudden, your screen goes blank, and now you feel like you've lost everything. All right, and you feel like you want to just punch the computer.
Yeah.
All right,
I've been there.
why? Your brain told you the computer did something bad and wrong it shouldn't have done. And then it tells you a couple other stories, including that the computer was totally to blame. You didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay.
And that's part of where anger comes from. I was educating a gentleman about that not too long ago, teaching him how the brain makes anger. And he said, that same thing happened to me just the other day. I was working on my computer and the computer went out on me and I got so furious with my computer. And then I realized I had dislodged the cable from the power source
Oops.
to the laptop. And I hadn't recognized that I did that. So his brain told him it was the computer's fault.
But then when he realized that, did his anger turn toward himself, or was he able to just say, I'm just human?
It went off of the computer. He was no longer angry at the computer. But then he could be angry at himself. But then the cure for that is to realize, well, wait a second. Is it realistic to assume that as a human being, you're never going to make a mistake like that? Beat yourself up for doing something innocent like we all do. But there are ways out of that one too. But again, you argue with your brain a little bit because your brain's going to say, oh, it was a horrible thing that you didn't recognize it and you should have and blah, 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 blah. But that's caca. But that's what our brains do all the time.
Some of us don't naturally do this though, right? Like
No.
to have these conversations with ourselves, we lack maybe some insight to ask ourselves these questions, and we just live in a reactionary state.
Yes.
I mean, that's really hard. I think we all come from there. I don't know where I lie on the spectrum. Maybe I'm just average. I don't know. But it's taken years for me to speak to myself and start just challenging myself and my thoughts.
That's where the power is. That's absolutely where our personal power is. I've had a number of absolutely life-changing breakthroughs in my life, not the least of which was going from one failed relationship after another, predictably, okay, to being happily married for 41 years. That doesn't happen without self-reflection.
Right.
And not just self-reflection, but actually turning the gaze inward first and then being able to pinpoint the exact patterns of behavior and thinking that were contributing to a lot of those failures in the past. And then correcting them, recognizing the ones that were faulty or leading to failure in the relationship domain and replacing them with better ones. That's the power of taking that first step in asking what's going on inside me that's producing these results that I don't like. Instead of blaming, and that's what I did. Every time one of my relationships with a woman failed, I identified what I thought the source was in that woman's personality so that the next time I wouldn't pick somebody that had those characteristics. And I was conscientious about making sure to do that. And sure enough, I would pick slightly different women, but the outcome would always be the same because That was a wrong diagnosis.
Wrong common denominator.
It was more than my fault than it was therefore it's stuff that I didn't realize about myself and how I approach relationships, how I thought about relationships, how I was conditioned to believe men and women operate in relationships, which was all like totally bad, wrong stuff. But I didn't know it at the time because I hadn't identified it. I hadn't looked inside. But turning the gaze from outside, which is so tempting, and society so encourages us, just focus there and don't look anywhere else. The real power in life comes from, okay, what's going on within me that's creating the things I don't like that I'm experiencing? Can I pinpoint the causes within me, and then I can do something about them? And that's exactly what we're talking about with anger. I couldn't get rid of my anger until I turned my gaze inside, said, how's my brain creating the anger? And then identifying A, B, C. So I had these series of major breakthroughs in my life, including relationships, where it all came from identifying the patterns within me that were causing a lot of the mischief and the difficulty. And yes, it is hard, and it is not usual for people to do that because everything in our world just has us look out and think that's all there is.
Yeah, that's hitting really hard on our third cornerstone of insight today.
Mm-hmm. And also what we say every week, that to make a change in our marriage first requires a change in ourselves. We're going to change those stinky or stale parts of our marriage. We need to look internally.
Also, we talk about sitting with ourselves and having a conversation. Part of that conversation is challenging ourselves, right? Like, is this correct or not?
And the best time to do that is maybe right when we feel that intense emotion.
It's great to have the inkling that's a good thing to do, and it's a productive thing to do, and it'll pay off in the long run. But it's hard to do when you're sitting by yourself with your brain's very good at what it does. It's very protective of its mechanisms. It doesn't want you to find out how it's tricking you. It's got cloaking devices. You often need help from other people in the beginning to pierce through and be able to tell the truth and practice with a coach or a confidant or somebody you trust or somebody who's good at doing that, so that you get some experience recognizing where your brain's misleading you and seeing some of the patterns. And to sit there and try to figure them out on your own, I didn't figure that stuff out on my own. I went through all these personal development courses and had all these different people give me input that eventually crystallized. I did the crystallization and putting stuff together, but I got a lot of input from other people and how to look at myself and what might be in there. It's very hard to just sit by yourself like in a cave and do that. And a lot of times you'll try and do it and you won't get anywhere, and then you'll conclude it's not possible.
Well, it's definitely possible.
So you let people know, this is what I'm working on. Can you be an accountability partner with me that I can just run things off of? And I don't want you to just support everything I'm saying. I want you to help me look at it objectively and recognize, did the other person do anything inherently wrong or bad?
And you know what's funny? You can do that with AI now. Oh. There's some AIs where you can have a personal one-on-one. Help me see what I'm not seeing. Here's my situation. I'm looking at it this way. Can you help me look at it in different ways? What am I missing? You know?
Tasha Eurich would call that external self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And our own conversations with ourselves, that's an internal self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that really to do both equally well creates that really insightful person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you have some final tips for something that our couples could practice if they really want to dive in and challenge themselves this week?
They could start with that first part of the anger chain. Whenever you get angry, realize that your brain's telling you that you're looking at things through, in terms of people's behavior or an object's behavior or something, that it's bad and wrong. And that may or may not be true. Can you play with that a little bit and see if you can see it in other ways? One of the Dalai Lama's books I was reading, called The Book of Joy, where he sits down with Desmond Tutu and they have this week-long time where they just riff on each other. And Desmond Tutu asked the Dalai Lama one day, what do you do when you get stuck? When you come upon a problem and you don't know what to do and you're just stuck? And the Dalai Lama says, the first thing I do, I try to look at the situation from at least 7 different perspectives.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome.
7.
I love it. He's speaking my language right there.
Again, that's not normal. It's not something we normally do, but you could look at things from multiple different perspectives, and you'll see from different perspectives, different pieces of truth that you don't see when you're just locked into the one that your brain gives you automatically, whatever that one is. We tend to just stay right there with that one channel.
If I were to define the purpose of my life with one word, it would be perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
Well, we've talked about this a lot.
That
Just
doesn't mean
trying
I'm
to see
doing
different
it,
perspectives.
but that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be like the Dalai Lama.
But we mess up a whole lot on our road to
Yes.
changing the way that we see things. I mean, I think the first step is recognizing that we're wrong sometimes, or that we messed up, or
Yeah.
that we didn't handle things right. But then let me come at it again. So, Dr. Mort, if they practice that this week and they get that down, then would you next send them to Dr. Orman's Life-Changing Anger Cure book?
Anybody that wants to end their destructive anger patterns, either it's already caused destruction or they're afraid it might, this book would be great. It'll give you a lot more detail of the stuff that we've been talking about today. But another thing I would recommend, one of the things that we have cockeyed in our society is we're deathly afraid of being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see any value in being wrong.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. Yep.
It's funny, the best things that have ever happened to me in life came from me realizing that I was wrong. The way you have breakthroughs in your anger is you have to be willing to be wrong, because your brain is making you wrong to get you angry in the first place most of the time. And if you're not willing to admit that, if you're not willing to embrace that and confront it and then deal with it, you're trapped. You're going to be stuck in that anger for
Right. Yeah.
a long, long time.
Being okay with being wrong, but not going overboard, right? Like, I am wrong. Everything I do is wrong, right? So there's that healthy balance, right?
As doctors, we don't want to make the wrong diagnosis, write the wrong prescription. We got to be real perfectionistic in the work that we do. But when you take that home in your personal life, then it can cause problems, because that's where you got to be willing to be wrong and realize that your perspective might not be accurate, might not be the best. And biologically, we don't see all the frequencies of radiation and light. We don't hear things other animals hear. We can't see what's behind us because our eyes are pointing forward. There's whole ways in which biologically we are never in touch with the truth about stuff.
Because we don't see their perspective, right? Or experience their perspective. Hey, this has been really good. It's been a great conversation. Thought-provoking conversation from a medical point of view on anger and what kind of how it gets triggered, what we do with it, and how to gain emotional intelligence and insight from that.
Yeah, what our brain is telling us and how we can turn that around.
Emotional mastery is what the end result of all that is. When you can control your emotions, decide when you want to have them, when you don't want to have them, and how long they last once you get triggered. That's emotional mastery.
Wonderful.
And so your book is Dr. Orman's Life-Changing Anger Cure.
You can find it on Amazon.
Yeah. So, well, hey, thank you so much, Dr. Mort, for joining us today on Marriage IQ.
Thanks for your great questions.
Yeah.
And to our audience, remember that to change from a stinky to a scintillating marriage first requires a change in ourselves. And we hope that you look us up on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Like us, and we will see you on another exciting episode of Marriage IQ.